This lesson is on the divisibility rules. And the reason that I'm doing this video on the divisibility rules because these rules will help us solve least common multiple, LCM, greatest common factor, GCF, and it also helps with fraction operations. So these rules are really important for us to understand to help with all of these concepts. So there's a little poem that goes along with all these divisibility rules, and I'm going to go through each rule with each part of the poem and give you an example for each rule. So for one, if it's a whole number, you're done. It's divisible by 1. Pretty much any whole number is always divisible by 1. Really easy rule. So the example is 6 divided by 1 equals 6. So any whole number is divisible by 1. So the rule for 2. If it's even, it's true, it's divisible by 2. So any number that's even, so ends with an even digit, is divisible by 2. So the example is the number 364. 4 is an even number, so we know it's divisible by 2. So for 3, add the digits to see if it's divisible by 3. So my example is with the number 51. So to find out if this number is divisible by 3, I would just add the digits of 51 together. So I'm going to add 5 plus 1, which equals 6. And I know 6 is divisible by 2 because 6 divided by 3 equals 2. So I know 51 is divisible by 3 because its digits add up to a number that is divisible by 3. So the rule for 4. Divide the last two digits by 4 and you'll get 4 for sure. So my example is 216. So to know if that number is divisible by 4, all you have to do is add its last two digits. I'm sorry, not add its last two digits. All you have to do is look at its last two digits, which are 16. And then all you have to do is say is 16 divisible by 4? And yes, 16 divided by 4 is 4. So we know the number 216 is divisible by 4. 4 is a tough one because if you just have a 2-digit number, you kind of have to just long divide it out if you don't know if it's divisible by 4. But if it's any number that's larger than a 2-digit number, we can hopefully use this trick of just looking at the last two digits to see if that number is divisible by 4. So let's look at 5. If it ends with 5 or 0, it makes 5 a hero. So to figure out if a number is divisible by 5, we look at its last digit, and we say if it's a 5 or a 0, we know it's divisible by 5. So my example is the number 635. It ends with the number 5, so we know that 635 divided by 5 is a whole number of 127. So we know that any number that ends in a 0 or a 5 is divisible by 5. For 6, if you got 2 and 3, you get you get 6 for free. So for 6, if a number is divisible by 6, you have to figure out if it's divisible by 2 or if it's divisible by 3. Looks like I made a little typo here. It should be 3. So let's first look at the number 126. Well, the rule for 2 says that we have to look at the last digit, and if it's even, we know if it's divisible by 2. Well, that last digit of 126 is 6. We know it's an even number, so we know it's divisible by 2. And then the rule for 3 is that if we have to add all the digits to see if that number is divisible by 3. So I'm going to add 1 plus 2 plus 6, and that will give me 9. And I know 9 is divisible by 3, so I know that 126 is divisible by 3. So because 126 passes the 2 rule and it passes the 3 rule, we know that 126 is also divisible by 6. So if you notice, I'm going to skip right to 9. I unfortunately don't have a divisibility rule for 7, nor do I have a divisibility rule for 8, so I have to go right to 9. To figure out 7 or 8, you're just going to have to long divide to see if it's divisible. But when we get to 9, the poem says add the digits, that's fine, to check on the 9. So similar to the 3 rule, we just have to add all the digits in our number to see if it's divisible by 9, to see if its sum is divisible by 9. So I'm going to add, for example, for 108, I'm going to add 1 plus 0 plus 8, and that sum is 9, and I know 9 divided by 9 is a whole number 1. So I know 108 is divisible by 9. My last rule is for the number 10. A 0 at the end, and we'll feel good about 10. So if any number that ends in a 0, we know is divisible by 10. Really easy rule. If it's not divisible by 0, if it doesn't end in 0, it is not divisible by 10. So my example is 1050, it ends in a 0. We know 10 can go into it 105 times. So that is all the divisibility rules for this lesson. You might want to go back and rewind this video and watch this again a few times, because some of these divisibility rules can be a little tough, but in the end they can help us in order to figure out what numbers can be divisible by other numbers, and can help us as we go further into our lessons.